Well, welcome to the 700 Club. You know, back in the 50s and 60s, there was a popular TV show featuring a little dummy named Charlie McCarthy. He was a little dummy that wore a tuxedo, and he sat on the lap of a ventriloquist whose name was Edgar Bergen. And Charlie McCarthy they would talk together because the ventriloquist could project his voice. And so as the dummy talked, the voice behind him was Edgar Bergen, and it was very popular. You know, I wonder now, when I listen to the nonsense that's being spoken about the infrastructure bill, when I listen to the nonsense that's being spoken about what happened in Georgia, and I listen to comments by a senator from New York, a Democrat, who said the following: paid leave is infrastructure. Child care is infrastructure. Caregiving is infrastructure. What nonsense. But I ask myself, who is the ventriloquist behind all this? And I'm not sure anybody knows for sure, but it does seem that there's somebody somewhere that is controlling the action, and the dummy is just speaking, and when it speaks, strange things come out of its mouth. Well, in other news, a catastrophic war with China. It could happen if the Chinese government invades Taiwan. Beijing sees President Biden as weak, so will China risk a shooting war with the United States? And what must the U.S. do to prevent it? Dale Hurd brings us this alarming report.
China has ramped up military operations in the Taiwan Strait significantly in recent days, and there are fresh fears of a Chinese invasion of Taiwan. China views Taiwan as a renegade province and could be tempted to make a move because, according to some experts, Beijing sees the Biden administration as weak. But would China actually risk war over Taiwan? And then what would America do? While China talks tough and has improved its military by stealing technology from the United States, Chinese leaders are keenly aware their military has not fought a major war in 42 years. And when it did in 1979, it lost, in the view of some experts, to Vietnam. But the commander of the U.S. Navy's Pacific Fleet warned the Senate Armed Services Committee that taking over Taiwan remains China's #1 strategic priority.
My opinion is this problem is much closer to us than most think, and we have to take this on with urgency.
With China's military untested in combat, while America's has been fighting in several nations, some experts say the last thing China wants is a shooting war with the United States. But China's true intentions remain a mystery.
I think it would be very, very dangerous to assume that all of this is just saber-rattling. China would certainly prefer to reunify with Taiwan peacefully. What the Chinese leadership has made clear over the last 70 years is they are prepared to use force if it is necessary.
What might help prevent an invasion of Taiwan would be an actual agreement with the United States to defend the island. There is no defense pact between the United States and Taiwan now, but something officials call strategic ambiguity, which means China doesn't know if the U.S. will defend the island or not. It's a strategy that was condemned during a recent online House subcommittee hearing on Taiwan.
Strategic ambiguity relative to Taiwan and China is, in my opinion, absurd and dangerous. We ought to be crystal clear that if China attacks Taiwan, we will be there with Taiwan.
Pentagon simulations show the U.S. losing a war with China over Taiwan, primarily because U.S. bases are so far from the island, and China may have already decided that now is the time to strike. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Thanks, Dale. They did it in Hong Kong, and the next target is Taiwan, and we cannot allow it to happen, but we will if we're weak. We've got to have strength, and we have got to position forces over there. It means we need to build our Navy. We don't have enough Navy ships. We don't have enough carriers. And China could overwhelm us if there's a shooting war over Taiwan, but we cannot allow the Chinese mainland to take over that independent republic. And if we do, we will lose face all over Asia. But it means we've got to be prepared. And are we prepared as a nation to go for it? The answer is probably not. And if we're spending all our time on diversity training and all the stuff that goes on in the military, we're not going to be ready to fight a war. And we have to have our loins girt about, as the Bible says, ready to go. And if we are ready to go, that is the best way to prevent a conflict, is we're strong. And it's peace through strength. Well, President Biden is also facing another big challenge. Russia is raising red flags in the Arctic. Ephraim Graham has that story.
Pat, Russian President Vladimir Putin congratulated his military for its performance during recent Arctic drills. The Russian military told Putin the exercise featured 3 nuclear submarines simultaneously breaking through the Arctic ice and warplanes flying over the North Pole. Russia has made it a priority to beef up its military presence in the Arctic. The region is believed to hold up to 1/4 of the Earth's undiscovered oil and gas. Putin has quoted estimates put the value of the Arctic mineral riches at $30 trillion. Russia, the U.S., Canada, and Denmark and Norway have all been trying to assert jurisdiction over parts of the Arctic. Here at home, the Centers for Disease Control says the more deadly and contagious UK variant is now the most common strain in the United States. This comes as President Biden announced this week every American adult will be eligible for the coronavirus vaccine by April 19th. CBN News Capitol Hill correspondent Abigail Robertson has this story.
While new variants of COVID-19 are rapidly spreading across the country, the good news is the vaccines seem to be effective against them. Still, President Biden warns we're in a race against time.
We're still in a life and death race against this virus.
Biden hopes we'll see a return to normal by the 4th of July, but encourages Americans to take precautions until then.
Even moving at the record speed we're moving at, we're not even halfway through vaccinating over 300 million Americans. This is going to take time.
44% of new COVID cases are coming from just 5 states: New York, New Jersey, Florida, Pennsylvania, and Michigan.
We're seeing the numbers go up, and we're still seeing that sick patient population coming in. We can definitely feel that there is an uptick, for the sick patient coming in.
Michigan healthcare workers say they're concerned by the ages of the patients being hospitalized.
We're seeing a lot more younger adults, middle-aged adults being affected, getting sick and coming in.
The CDC director warns daycare centers and youth sports are leading to a rise in cases amongst youth.
65,000 cases, that's 65,000 opportunities for mutations to occur, for more variants to spread.
But Dr. Anthony Fauci says there is good news on the efficacy of the vaccines.
Antibodies delivered by vaccination persist at least through 6 months, and likely from the shape of the curve well beyond that.
And he assures Americans the end will come.
We'll know it when we see it. It'll be obvious as the numbers come down rather dramatically. And when they do, we're going to wind up getting really stepwise much, much more towards what we consider approaching a degree of normality, which everyone really quite dramatically notices it. It's on the way. Hang in there.
Dr. Fauci also says the federal government will not require American citizens to carry vaccine passports, although he foresees some businesses implementing their own rules requiring them. Reporting from Virginia, Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
President Biden is set to unveil a series of executive orders addressing gun violence today. One area he will address is tighter regulations requiring buyers of homemade guns to undergo background checks. He will also nominate David Chipman to be the director of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. Chipman is a former federal agent and advisor of a gun control group. President Biden may have a big problem getting his massive infrastructure package through Congress. Senator Joe Manchin, a key Democrat, said under no circumstance would he support passing bills like the infrastructure bill without Republican support. The potential setback coming as the president unveiled details of his plan. George Thomas is on this story.
The president's massive infrastructure plan faces stiff resistance in the months ahead. Republicans calling it a big liberal spending agenda that comes with major tax hikes, while on the left, progressive Democrats are demanding even more money to tackle things like climate change. President Biden says he's open to negotiating the details of the $2 trillion plus package. However,
here's what we won't be open to. We will not be open to doing nothing. Inaction simply is not an option.
While the plan calls for spending around $820 billion on roads, bridges, railways, airports, and power grids, there's also massive amounts of money going to projects that Republicans say isn't related to infrastructure, like $400 billion for care for the elderly and disabled.
This package that they've laid out at the beginning, styled infrastructure, is a Trojan horse for massive tax increases and a whole lot of more debt and a whole lot of spending.
Republicans say that extra spending coming from Democrats stretching their definition of infrastructure. New York's Democratic Senator Kirsten Gillibrand getting flack after she tweeted that paid leave is infrastructure, child care is infrastructure, caregiving is infrastructure. Republicans like Ted Cruz pushing back. Abortion is infrastructure. Gun control is infrastructure. Forced unionization is infrastructure. Whatever the left wants is infrastructure, Cruz tweeted. Politico estimated that only about 37% of the bill will be spent on what the president himself defines as infrastructure projects. The president defending the amount of spending in the bill.
I've heard from my Republican friends say that many of them say it's too big. They say, why not focus on traditional infrastructure? We are America. We don't just fix for today. We build for tomorrow.
The president wants to fund his agenda by raising the corporate tax rate to 28%, rolling back former President Trump's 2017 tax cuts, and expanding the global minimum tax rate to 21%. Republican lawmakers and business groups argue the hikes will crush American competitiveness.
What the president proposed this week is not an infrastructure bill. It's a huge tax increase, for one thing, and it's a tax increase on small businesses, on job creators in the United States of America.
Democrats hoping to use a budget reconciliation process to bypass Republican opposition got a major setback from one of their very own today. West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin, a key Democrat, said under no circumstances would he support passing bills like the infrastructure one without Republican support. I simply do not believe budget reconciliation should replace regular order in the Senate, Manchin wrote in the Washington Post. Senate Democrats must avoid the temptation to abandon our Republican colleagues on important national issues. George Thomas, CBN News.
This bill looks dead in the water, Pat.
Well, it looks like it depends so much on the health and safety of Senator Joe Manchin. He's become a hero. But possibly Christy Gillibrand from out in Arizona. They're just two of them. And they're standing in the way of monstrous overhaul of our entire nation. And it's going to be jammed through if Joe Biden has his way and his allies and the squad, as they're called in the House. If they could jam this stuff through, they'll do it by executive order and by fiat and all the rest of it. But you know, if I were you, I sure would pray for Joe Manchin, and because
may he live a long life.
Yeah, he's the guy with his finger on the dike, and if he takes it out, the flood will come upon us, and it will be horrible. So please pray for America. All right.